Excellent. T307 tutorial 4. Okay, let's make a start. So, as you know, block 4, diffusion, consumer and innovation. But really what block 4 is talking about is distribution and renewable energy. So the focus of the module of this block is renewable energy and how we distribute product. So let's see, what do we mean by distribution of product? Now if you think about it, distribution of product made of two words, distribution and product. Distribution really is the process of diffusion. It's how we insert something into the market. The book talks about the take-up of product by consumers. How consumer would come up to take products. Now product means innovation. So if you think about this sentence, distribution of product, it can say something differently. It can mean insertion of innovations to market. So the big word, distribution of product, what it means? It means how we insert new innovations to the market. And that is the focus of this blog, and it's really interesting because we're looking at how we market product, how customers come to buy product, and we also focus on renewable energy. Now you already seen Roger diffusion curve. Do you remember this, Alex, in figure 2?
Yeah.
So that came before in previous blogs, but now we're looking at it from a different angle. So if we still consider in Roger diffusion curve, we think about the innovators, and then we think about the early adopters, which are customers that will be happy to purchase anything they can find around it, anything which is new. We have the early majority and late majority, which are the main bulk of our customers, and the laggers. These are the people that will purchase something only when it is established in the market, not before, which is great. Now we will focus on diffusion of product and renewable energy. What I've done, I did something interesting for you. I've actually divided the whole book, the whole block, into this table using 3 words. So when we're thinking about insertion of innovation to market, today we will look at who, how, and where. So we will look about who is involved in the insertion and purchase of product in the market, how it is done, and where. When I say where, I mean also policies around it, how policies affect diffusion of products. So let's have a quick look. When you think about who, you think about passive consumer, active consumer, and what we call empowered consumer. And I will explain each of these elements. When we think about how, we will discuss about technology and innovation, global reach, and the environment. How each one of them help us to insert product into the market. And then when we think about this keyword where, we think about how we learn from the user what the user needs. There is a process there. It's not just inserting product, but learning what users require. We then apply the conclusion. We apply what we've learned, and there's also an element of making change, creating change in the market. And I will explain each of these keywords as well. So I don't have a boring diagram for you today, but I have this interesting way of looking at the whole block through 3 keywords. That will make sense of the content, because there is a lot of content in the book. Did you find it that there is quite overwhelming, Alex?
Trying to go through it
Yeah.
and count what you need, you had to be quite discerning when you were going through pages.
Exactly, and there are many examples, and there are some small overlaps as well, I must say, but that is fun. We'll go through it. Okay, inserting of innovation to market. Great. Let's talk about who. Passive consumer. Passive consumer is the conventional consumer. These are the people that will buy product, they will buy innovation once they've been proven to be safe. So you insert a product to the market, but we don't know if it's safe, we don't know the effect of it. Only once we do know, only once customer is happy with this, when they know that there is no risk, then the passive consumer would buy the product. That's why we call them passive. You have to convince them, you have to approach them and say, it's been in the market, it has been tested, we know it is safe, now you can buy it. And this, by the way, what happens when we consider the mobile phone. So when they've started, they spread really only once we knew that there was no risk, or once the risk was reduced. So here's a model of an old mobile phone at the beginning of this technology. It's figure 1 in the book, and you can see here figure 7 in the book how the number of mobile phone and subscriber grew from 1991, and we can see that around 1999 and 2000 there was really a big push and development, many 2004, 2005, when the product was already something like 15 years in the market. Gradually it has been proved that it is safe, although I could challenge this notion and say perhaps it's not really that safe still, but we're not scared of mobile phone. It took a long time for us, for the innovator, to establish this belief, this assertion that it is safe, and then it really pushed forward in terms of sales. So passive consumers will pick up product passively, so to speak, only when we know it is safe and there is no risk. As we can see in the example of mobile phone, and you will find the figure 7 in the module box. Now if we're still considering who, let's look from passive consumer, let's examine the active consumer. Now active consumer, unlike the passive, is conscientious consumer, which means they have strong interest in the environment as well as in health. That means that these are more active people that will be willing to take risks, and the book explains it in more details. They will be willing to take risks and test products that comes to the market. Any product that you will bring to the market and you will say it will improve your life, it will conserve energy, it will reduce or reuse energy, then the active consumer will be happy to test it. So unlike the passive consumer who might be cautious a bit and say, well, this has not been tested already, the active consumer say, great, we're going to test it. We are happy to try and see if it really works. So when we're thinking about how we insert innovation to market, we're thinking about our passive consumer, and we also think about the active consumers. These are two different ways of looking at consumers, and we try to branch both of them when we try to insert things into the market, product into the market. Active consumer, very much interested in health and in the environment, and willing to take risks to test product which can bring benefits to the environment and to the well-being of people. Okay, now we have example of green power and how this consumer, the active consumer, are enthusiastic consumers. For example, in figure 9 here on the right, you can see a table of, in this case, a German consumer and how they're willing to test something or to pay more for green product. So how much in this case German consumer, depending on age of course, are willing to pay more in order to buy product that will be more green to the environment, greener product. Because in this case, because of their enthusiasm, they will agree to pay more. Passive consumer will not agree to do so, but active consumer would agree. Now most people say that there's no problem paying 2% up to 6% more for a new product if we promise them that the product is much better. So even if we didn't prove it to them, they will say, fine, I'm willing to pay up to 6 or 8% more just to try this product. We see that there are quite a few that are willing to pay more than 10% here at the top. And I must say, there are not many, but it is quite a lot when you think about it. If you come to enthusiastic consumer and say, we have something, great product, we're not sure, we need to test it, it will be good to the environment, would you be willing to pay 10%? You have 10% of people that will say yes, and that is a lot. It is a lot of people that are going to say, I'm going to pay more just to test the product. So that's important when we are inserting product to the market. We know that some people will agree to test this for us. Some people will agree to pay more. Okay, now when we consider who, we have another model for consumers. This is what we call empowered consumers right here. Now these are interesting type of consumers. They are actually influencing new product. They are themselves involved in creating new technology. They are happy to come up with radical approaches for new solutions. Now at this point you come across this idea of top-down or bottom-up, which I'm sure Alex you know already about it. So how would you define bottom-up or top-down approach?
Top-down, I would actually say, is more a push approach. So you have large corporations, governments, that sort of thing, institutions pushing a product downwards through to the consumers, whereas you have on bottom up, you're looking at consumers being normally small groups, being the ones who are pushing upwards or pulling, if you like, the market to take up what they want.
Yeah, exactly so. Bottom up will be enthusiastic or empowered consumers who find a niche, they find a problem, and they push it up. The difference between bottom up and top down, a part of what you have already explained, is that bottom up groups will actually make the product. They will come up with the ideas. So top down will be more government policies to try influence people, as well as companies. But it's mainly about government policies and support. Support people or company develop something, whereas bottom up is the actual development of product coming up from the people themselves, from the consumers themselves, exactly as you have explained. So let's have a look at this definition. Top down, government or companies coming from above and trying to push a product into the market. Bottom up, as we've said, by consumers or even users themselves who come up with novel ideas. They are very enthusiastic and they will try to push a product into the market. We have some examples. The books provide some examples. For example, here in the California power crisis, and you'll read more about it in the book, problems of high bills. So people took initiative to their hand, as we can see in this photograph here, and started to install solar panels. This on the right here is example from the UK, and what's interesting about it, these are actually tiles. So it's roof tiles that are solar, as opposed to solar panel, as you can see here on the left. So this is very advanced, very good example of grassroots bottom-up approach to developing something. Another example here at the bottom right, figure 11. You will find it in the book as well. Her house, that's Susan's house in Oxford, producing electricity, but also have surplus of electricity, so she can power some small electric vehicle from the electricity coming from the solar panel. Now I must say that in hot countries like Greece or Israel, you would find a solar tile on every single rooftop. So when you buy a house, it's already come pre-installed with not a roof, not solar tiles, but panels on the roof. So they are very much advanced in warm country naturally. So this is old news. if we are frank, if we talk about it, it's old news. It's relatively new in Britain. It's catching up in the last 10-20 years, but in other countries it's almost old news. So it's also interesting to see the differences between countries. So again, the point here is about the empowered consumer. They had problem with high bills. They wanted to do something about it, so they initiate this solar panel initiatives from bottom up. Okay, let's look at other example which the books bring. This is figure 13 on page 54 from the book. These are examples for self-generated power product, again developed by consumers. So these are small types of self-generated products. Now we must say that empowered consumers are supported by the government. So the government will happily support any enthusiastic person or a company that's coming up with an idea that have the benefit to improve our life. They will support us, definitely so. However, there is a problem with the empowered consumers, that they represent a minor group in society. So if you think about it, if there are a few hundred people that are enthusiastic about something and they want to push product, they are a small group of consumers. They are really a tiny percentage of people who are buying something. And therefore, the initiative sometimes not covering the costs. So you really have to be enthusiastic about what you're proposing, even though the government will support you, because the scale of the buying power is not that large. Here in figure 52, we have some example of what we call grassroots solar energy initiative, as we've seen in the previous photograph examples. So you can read all about it in table 5.2 and some case studies. This case study is really interesting because it talks about solar clubs, how people came together in simply clubs and started to initiate product. There are many examples in the book about such communities or clubs in Austria. And here, figure 18, you can read more about the various motivation to adopting solar energies. In this case, it's in Austria. So obviously, again, it is a bottom-up approach. And what we're saying is how much we see here added comfort, or in the environmental concern, or the cost saving. Break it down to regions in Austria. So added comfort, very important factors, environmental concern, also important factors, and cost saving varies depending if it's Lower Austria or Upper Austria. So various motivation to adopting solars, again, important concept when you need to think about how you insert your product into the market, what people are after. Is it about comfort, is it about the environment, or is it about costs? In truth, it's about all three factors. Here's example, figure 18, again from simple clubs in Austria. You see figure 16, tube fitting table, and figure 17, we can see solar companies and self-consumption groups by year. So see the massive jump around 1989, and we will look at it again later. The books also bring us some photograph from figure 15, that is the solar club we mentioned, but that one is in Wales, here, top left. We have renewable devices, here figure 14. About this ring, they said it reduces the sound, reduces noise, and also makes the wind more effective. That's the argument here. And figure 20, you can see the offshore wind farm, which is interesting because it argues that 50% of it is owned by the local residents. That is something incredible, that local residents can come up and own 50% of something so innovative. It is an incredible way of approaching products. Groups of people are coming together and saying, we're going to put 50% of the money to actually create this renewable energy facility. That is remarkable. Now, another interesting example which the books bring is Apple. Apple computer, of course, is a good example of enthusiastic consumers. Now, it started as a computer club, believe it or not. It started as a computer club, and what they wanted to do is to produce cheap personal computers, because as you know, around that time, IBA computer cost a fortune. So they wanted to produce cheap personal computer, but it was designed for the hobby market. They didn't know at that point that it will reach the mass market. So it's incredible when you think about it that number one or number two computer company today started from bottom up as a computer club. I find it fascinating. The same thing, by the way, happened with Linux operating system, which is also a very important operating system used today in the mass market. So we have Macintosh, we have Windows, and we have Linux. Very good example of bottom-up approach. Now we talk about how consumer innovate from bottom-up approach. So consumer come up with innovations, but the books also talk about how they market this product. That is interesting. So bottom-up approach for marketing, not just for innovating. And the way that people doing it is spreading by word of mouth, and also what the book calls social movement. Today we call it social media. So it's a very interesting way in learning how we come up with initial ideas, how we produce them, and how we push them forward. All is bottom up. Okay, so we talk about what I call who, which is the passive, active, and empowered consumer. That's great. Now let's look at this section here, which is how. First, we will consider what I call technology and innovation. So remember, we're still talking about the diffusion, how we diffuse product in the market, how we bring item into the market. Now, what you will find that with the question of how, technology and innovation, we will see that some inventions are unusual inventions that from a bottom-up approach you can figure out how to do them, but top-down approach perhaps will not realize how to do so. And what I mean, for example, farmers had demand for warm waters. So the farmers themselves, in this example here, they knew that they need warmer water, and that's why they took solar initiative. So this was a bottom-up example of user locating the problems, because it may be difficult for government to locate the problem, the issues. From bottom up, you know what the problem is, you live around it. In this case, warm water, and then you come up with a solution. It is a much quicker approach of tackling a product and diffusing them in the market. Now, a bottom-up approach also means that you can adjust innovations that perhaps will not work on a global market into the niche where they are successful. So again, the Danish wind power initiative, it is privately owned. The idea here, it perhaps may not work on global or even national scale. So for big companies or big government, it may be difficult to tackle it. It may be difficult for them to look into niches. Using technology and using initiative, small groups can then tackle niches, and it's much easier for them via, in this case, privately owned, or as we say, private and co-op initiatives. So you can see here in figure 19 the growth of privately owned or co-op wind projects. In this case, that's in Denmark, because they knew the problem, they lived around it, they say we can solve it, and they push it forward. So through technology and innovation, when I say innovation, I mean being relevant to the problem on your scale, we can push product, we can insert innovation into the market. So diffusion via technology. When you're a pioneer, you can try and test things. You can take the risk and you can explore the technology. If you have a lot of energy and a lot of willpower, you will do that. You'll be willing to test things, and you can do so on small scale, from bottom up. It is much easier. The enthusiasm will also spread the words about the product. So how? We discussed about technology, innovative, and trying out on the small scale. That is one aspect of how. Let's look at a different aspect, and that will be global reach. We can also tackle things on a global level. And to do so, we think about national support schemes. So national support scheme could be top-down, really. We're talking about how the scheme can support companies or empowered consumer on a global level, supporting them to insert product into the market. Now, the interesting thing is that we have what we call national support schemes, but we also have international agreements, and we will look into it in a second. With these international agreements, there are many ways that we can affect how product is diffused in different countries, not in our countries. For example, climate change policies, which were discussed in 1997 in Japan. So that is when countries really sat down to work together. In this case, tackling climate changes. You will read more about it in section 9.1, the emission trading. That was in Kyoto. So the Kyoto arrangement talk about targets for reducing greenhouse gases emissions. Now, it's important to say that the UK was lacking slightly behind in this case, because the UK was required to reduce emission by 12.5%, whereas other companies were required to reduce emission by some 5%. So the UK was asked to do so by 12.5%. Now, the UK renewable application and the Kyoto Agreement can affect producers all across Europe, because what this means is that decision or action taken in one country will affect the diffusion of product in other countries. Naturally, if we have to reduce our emission by 12.5, it means that European company who would need to sell product to Britain will have to consider that. So the Kyoto arrangement, as example for a global arrangement, global policies, will demonstrate how obligation in one country will affect insertion of product into the market in different countries. Because we're now sitting together, this was in Kyoto, but the European Union is really good at sitting together and setting up policies, we now in France have to think twice what we produce if we're going to sell it in Denmark. Decision in one country affect the diffusion of product all over the world. And this is how we consider the global reach. You can say it is global limitation in a way. We're limiting one country to the other. On the other hand, it is global collaboration, establishing standards all across the globe. And remember, we're focusing about renewable energy in this block. So very interesting concept. Okay. Let's look at the environment itself. So we're still considering how we insert innovation to markets. And now let's consider the environment. So if we think about the European Union, there are many links and policies on environments. And again, they are affecting each other. Now, we should say that the UK is not up to target at this point now, 2014. We are doing very well in many areas, but in terms of European Union policies, we are a bit behind. And the book will explain more about this. Now, many countries did nuclear investments in the past, but we should admit that only now in the last, 10 years, we are seriously investing in renewable energies. So renewable energy is not new. I mean, it was developed decades ago, but only now we're starting to look at it very seriously. You can see here table 4 on the right, which is on page 140. That is the target for electricity from renewable product. So I think I can see the UK here, over here, UK and France. 10% for UK, 21% for France. You can explore this table in more detail, and you will see the jump and the differences between the country on page 114. So it should be noted that only now we're seriously investing in renewable energy. Now, what's interesting about this statement about nuclear research is that nuclear energy is neutral. When you think about it, there is energy. It's not good and it's not bad. Nuclear energy is not bad. The question is, how do we route it? Where do we route it? Do we create nuclear plant to produce bomb? And I'm not going into philosophical argument, but I'm just saying, what do you do with your nuclear investment, with your nuclear plant? Do you develop bombs, or do you develop clear energy from the nuclear investment? So the energy itself is neutral. We can't say nuclear is bad. It's neutral. The question is, what do we take seriously? And only recently we've been taking seriously investment in renewable energy. And the point here is seriously, because we've done it before, but it wasn't serious. Now things are changing. They are looking much better. We are improving, so that is good. It was around 2005 that we started considering more clean technology and reducing the nuclear power plant. So that's not long ago. Around 2005, we can say that we become eco-conscious. We started to take ecological conscious choices. So that was again how we insert innovation to the market. We think about technology, innovation from bottom up. We think about global reach, which is top down but supports bottom up as well. And we think about the environment, which only recently we're taking seriously. Okay, inserting of innovation to market. Let's look at what I called here where I also referring to policies, not just physical places. So, learning users' needs. What happened is that we have to understand how users behave. Obviously, what they need, what they require, but also how they will behave. What would they buy? They may not necessarily buy everything we provide them, even though we think that they need it. So it's a way of looking from the bottom. It's a top-down approach of understanding what people really require, what they need, what they will be willing to pay for, and how much. Although we say that it is top-down approach because it's about policies, government, and companies wanting to understand the users, you can also consider it as a bottom-up approach in a way, because you could study those bottom-up initiatives and how they operate and learn from them. So largely we will think about it as top-down approach, but there is also a place to say that it could be bottom-up approach. So again, we consider where, in this case, learning users' needs. Let's look at an example here. Now we all know that governments do influence any technological development. Not any, but many technological development. And I think they're doing good many times. They will support strategy of economic and any national importance, so to speak. So if the government will find a niche, or if they will find that there is a company that can improve our life with a new product, they will support them. Here in table 1 on the right, we see the UK support for renewables energy. This is really interesting table. Here on the far right we talk about NFFO, which means non-fossil fuel obligations. Here. So you can see from 1991 to 2003, research grants and what we call now renewable obligations, and what we called before non-fossil fuel obligations. But these are two different things. The one will be anti-fossil, non-fossil, and the other will be renewable obligation, which means actively supporting renewable schemes. And you see that renewable obligation is around, we started to consider this only 12 years ago, around 2001. So it's a very interesting table to look at how our understanding of what users require, what society requires, has changed. You can see it through the figures of how much the government supported initiative. And there is a reason for the differences in the sum. The reason is that as we started to support initiative, we also learned from them. We learn what user needs. It's about learning what the user needs. And I will explain it. So in 2004, Blair said that the carbon system should now be evolved. Now we need to think about green energy. And then we started to look into policies to reduce gases around 2004. Now it has an implication. Here, if we go back to the table, around 2001, we started to consider renewable obligation. Now, this is an important point, because the downside, in this case, around those years, the downside of policies to reduce gases was that there was a lot of pressure on everyone, on Tony Blair, on the government, on consumer, on you and me. There was pressure now to start reducing house gases, which meant quick solutions. Unfortunately, there were many quick solutions, mainly trapping gas, or just saying you have to reduce the use of energy, so you have to shut up things and use less energy. So that was the downside of this effect, of this policy around those years. You had to do quick and immediate solutions, and unfortunately we're quite good in the UK with quick solutions, but they're not good for the long term. On the other hand, there were many tax credits introduced around then to companies that will reduce energy use. This is great. This is more long-term initiative. And as we know, the UK companies do work with government policies to reduce the energy, and the government support would increase competition. This is an interesting point which the book explained further, because if the government come up with initiative that will reduce your tax, many people will jump into the cart. Many companies will jump into the cart and say, yes, we want to reduce our energy use because we're going to get tax relief. So it increased competition, and we know that competition in the market is good. Now we're still considering learning the user need in this case. So now I should say that there were a few errors that were made. So there were policies coming up from companies, products were introduced, tax credit were introduced, but there were a few errors made trying to encourage this new product. For example, the research into wind power and wave power. The book on page 96 explained the difference in the assessment that government had between 1970s and 1990s. So we should admit that in 1970s we've seen things differently. We had different knowledge compared to 1990s. We knew less. Now perhaps we know better, or simply we have a different way of looking at things now. They are different in the assessment when we consider wind power and wave power. Therefore, the government, where it would encourage some incentives, then they would withdraw the incentive. The market has changed, and my point here is that we have learned how the market operates. We've learned the needs of users and how the market operates. So some incentives which cost a lot of money didn't work, unfortunately. We had to learn. So what you find out is that you will need to insert product into the market and test them. You can have many strategies and many assessments, but you will not always know exactly how a product, how initiative will operate in the market. So there is kind of a pattern or stages to the process of diffusing product into the market. We have to learn and we have to understand the market. Market matures, market changes, and as they do, there are less companies competing. You can read more about it in page 103 and look at figure 21. It talks about the number of firms for wave and tidal energy and wind energy, and it shows the difference in companies leading to fewer companies participating in this initiative. Because we've learned the market, we understood it, the market has matured, and there will always be less companies competing on the product as market mature. You will see more about it in page 103. So at this point I will stop because I spoke a lot. And perhaps, do you have any question at this point?
Not so far.
Excellent. Do you follow up or is it too quick?
No, it's fine, thank you.
Okay, great. So we're still in this table, which look at the whole block, the whole book, asking who, how, and where. So let's consider where, and we will talk about applying conclusions. So once we've learned the market, we have to apply it into further production. As we learn the market, and the book talk about it more in page 108, we learn to avoid pitfall. There are many pitfalls in any market, you could say. But one of the pitfalls we find with renewable energy, unfortunately, is that many companies were trusting one source of funding, mainly the government. And likewise, the government would trust, here it says one supplier, but it means a small amount of suppliers. So there was a kind of a focus of who gives the money and who uses the money. And that was a pitfall. That was a problem. You can see more about it in page 108, for example, figure 25. Here we talk about the learning curves on a global market. It's about solar panels. Likewise, figure 26, about electricity generation technology. Again, the learning curves of how much electricity is produced and how much electricity was used. So it's a very interesting conclusion that as we learn to find pitfall, we learn the market as well. And you read more about it, all the details on page 108. Okay, so the interesting thing is that to improve or even develop product, you must diffuse it into the market. But that's interesting because the whole block 4, talking about diffusion things into the market. And here we say that in a way, you must create a product, you must diffuse it into the market, and only then you will learn the behavior and the patterns of people, of consumer, and of market. So in truth, it's intertwined process. You learn as much as you can, you learn from past mistakes, but then you will also have to diffuse your product and, dare I say, see what happened. You will have to learn the behavior while your product is already in the market. Now it makes selecting the right technology very difficult. It's a difficult process. And what happened is that indeed some government policy and some companies did opt out of new technology. The book explained more about it. I think it was in the wind power that in 1970s the government and companies says, no, we're not going to invest. We're not going to do anything about it. We're just going to wait and to see if the market will pick it up and if the market will pick up the correct technologies. So it's like riding on the tide. So saying that we're not going to put the massive investment in the initial stages of innovation. We're going to wait for someone else to do it. And then if it picks up, we will pick up and then we will join the process. It's a very risky concept. In some cases, it saves a lot of money. So you have this approach of learning the technology in the short term or in the longer term. If you consider product and technology for the short term, it means you're looking at a rapid commercial move. That's what you're seeking. Short term, I'm going to make a gain in 10 or 20 years. And it happens a lot in the UK. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's happened a lot in the UK. Page 109 will give you more details about this and more examples. Okay, the last section I want to share with you today is what I call change. When I say change, I mean mainly something that happens as the result of the activities of small companies. Now, the interesting thing about small companies is that for them it is easier to explore niche market. If you are a small group, if you live where you produce things, it is very easy for you to see the niche market around you, because things are there are less disruptions. If you compare big companies or even government support, which is a good thing, but they can be disruptive. There could be challenges. So big company may find it very difficult to find out small niches. Big companies will find it very difficult to be supported by the government and then have to change something. It is a very difficult process, whereas small companies find it much easier. So if we talk about a change, how do we change things? We talk about small companies and their benefit. It is far easier for them to locate small niche and then to try to get it into the mass market. For small companies, it's also easier to adopt changes. If you need immediate change from today to next year, it's easier to implement it if you're a small company, because it's not that difficult to navigate through problems that you find in the market when you're a small company. Now, you can say that small companies' processes are so-called less reliable. However, it is easier for them to identify needs, market needs. So you have to be on the balance between identifying the needs, but then trying to produce something which is reliable, which is viable, and which will sell in the market. Not just in terms of technology, getting the technology to work, but getting the technology into the market so that people will actually buy it. That is what we mean by reliable. It is more difficult for small companies, reliability, but it is easier for them to identify needs and make change. Within small company, you find a lot of enthusiastic consumers, because it is not that we're referring to large companies in large markets. That is one aspect of diffusion, large companies within large market, but there you will find the challenges of finding enthusiastic consumers, because it's massive, it's large, you're looking at the whole market, whereas small companies are enthusiastic producer and consumers, make it much easier for them to come up with new ideas. So again, when we consider how to insert innovation to the market, we can talk about change and the differences between small companies and large companies. We should admit that niche markets, once been identified, they could be a threat to big companies. That is a very interesting concept, because if a big company is based on producing something for existing markets, they have an existing structure. If they will need to change their existing structure to fit a new niche market, that could threaten big companies. So small companies and enthusiastic consumer producers have the advantage that they can adapt quickly. So, insertion of innovation to market. This is block 4, and the book was talking about who is involved, the consumers. I was talking about how technology, innovation, compared to global reach and the environment, and where. Here I'm referring to learning the needs of user, applying conclusion, the pitfall we've made, the policies we came up with, and the ability to change and bring change to the market. Excellent.